Welcome to Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect within their affinity groups. And we have different resources on there related to business and health. But more importantly, this podcast is all about athletes transitioning out of sports. It's such a major issue today between mental health issues, between financial literacy. So what we do is we interview former collegiate and professional athletes, and we talk about their successful transition into business leadership and entrepreneurship. And it's all about teaching Aspire athletes that there is life after sports. So excited today to have Nischay Rawal on. How you doing, Nischay?
Good. Thanks for having me, Rob.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. So we're back into the tennis world again. So, the interesting story here, and Nischay is going to share, is he grew up in India and played his, through high school and all that there, but ultimately got recruited to the U.S. to Alcorn State, where he was a college tennis player. Took up accounting and finance in college and ultimately got into it as a career. He also did some work at a tennis academy helping his brother. And then today he's a successful entrepreneur of NR CPAs and business advisors. Nischay, what I like to do is I always talk about how did sports shape you growing up? So growing up and leading up into college.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rob. Yeah, sports, tennis, especially, grew up playing that. It did help me shape as a human being, from discipline to waking up early in the morning to the monotony of life, such as practicing a single stroke every single day to get better, right? So that definitely I took it in the college side of things as well, and eventually in the real world. Once I graduated at a small boutique CPA firm that I was working at prior to founding my own practice, right? So these constant small little things, those repetitions that I used to, or many athletes we all do, to perfect our craft, that helps a lot in having that obsessive mindset, and that is probably the foremost reason why I was able to set up my own practice, at a fairly young age.
Yeah, that's great. And you hear that a lot, and we'll talk more about that throughout the podcast. But how was I guess almost like a sense of transition. So, growing up in India and having all your formal education there, was it a tough transition, coming into the U.S. and then, right into college?
Yeah, it was absolutely a cultural shock, I would say, right? It was a big cultural shock, but through internet and gearing towards Western culture, that definitely helped. But of course, experiencing the American culture for the first time, was a complete different experience. You're home away from home, right? So the only family some of us athletes or like past athletes had at that point is your teammates, right? Which were also diverse. So it has its ups and downs, good and bad. You get to mingle, you get to learn about different people, where they're from, their stories, and you can compare, contrast, as opposed to me staying in India, limiting in being around. It's not as diverse as US, as you know, so I would not get the opportunity to meet these great people from all different walks of life and share these genuine friendships that actually is scattered all across the globe, So that to me is one of the most fascinating things.
Yeah, that's great. I can imagine. I mean, as it is, it's I guess for anybody, with athlete or non-athlete, going from high school to college is always a challenge. So changing, going to a different cultural situation, I'm sure, like you said, just it brings on different things. But it's great that I think that's one beautiful thing about sports, is that whole team camaraderie and just it, bringing each other together. And I know too, like a lot of these athletes, when they go to different schools that aren't by where they grew up, sometimes they don't have the opportunity to go home on a holiday or something like that. And it's nice to have these other athletes that they can, whether they go home with them or in that area, is, what works out well. So let's talk about, athletes transition out of sports. So it's a big issue, like we mentioned. When you were in school at Alcorn State, were there any kind of classes or workshops, and not just like a one day, where it was kind of geared towards, what's next after sport.
Oh, Rob, you brought a pretty interesting point, and we'll, do definitely want to talk more about it, right? The short answer is no. We did not have some sort of training. What happens with life after college, right? In college, sure, you're playing the sport. People are traveling every week to play a sport during in season, right? Sometimes twice a week, right? Which, of course, stops after you graduate and in the real world from working, depending on the industry you're in, right? In my particular industry, it was starting out, it is a desk job, right? So from playing every weekend, twice a weekend, spring, fall, no matter what, you you sit behind the desk for 8 hours. It was rough, I must say. I just you got to grind, and you have to give 100% at work as well, right? So very tough transition. I would say it had a major impact on my emotional, mental, as well as physical well-being as well. Did gain a lot of excessive weight, which I shouldn't have, because of just for whatever reason, right? Let myself go, which, it was actually a couple years ago I started getting back into it, meaning the fitness side of things, and I still remember first week or first few days that I went to the gym, I was bawling, bawling in tears. I was like, oh man, like, oh shoot, like, I was literally in tears that, oh man, like, body forgot what pain feels like, and I was exposed to this every single day for last probably, yeah, sure, 4 years in college, but then
Right.
another 10, 15 years when I was growing up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's tough, and I think what happens is you brought up a point. It's hard when you're especially in your sport to even have the time because we know it's so regimented between practices and matches and travel. But it's so important. I talked to one of my other guests, and he talked about how he wishes there was a mandatory class or at least a 4 week workshop when he was there that would have better prepared him. And that's some of the things that I think some of the schools are starting to recognize. We as a company, Alumni Direct, and we've got some great resource partners looking to potentially get into some of these athletic departments and try to become that extended partner and providing some additional curriculum and workshops to help not only the current athletes but the alumni athletes as well.
yeah,
So
absolutely. I do reckon this would be like a great thing. This is very much needed.
yeah, I mean, even like think about just even from a financial standpoint, and guess what? You got to pay taxes, or especially that gets in, sometimes like the NIL, it's the same kind of thing. It's just I think a lack of education is something that needs to be more of. But so let's talk a little bit about networking, connecting. Obviously, that's met how we met. Shout out to Doug DeRosa, a good friend of ours, and he made the connection. How important do you see networking connecting, especially while you're still playing?
Yeah, I would say it's, if not the top, definitely top three things. Me personally, I do a lot of networking. I'm a part of a lot of groups as well, and that has helped me expand my practice. Not only that, I am able to add value to my client base because of the groups that I am associated with, right? I I'm sure we've mentioned this. I'm a CPA running my own practice, right? And I deal with a lot of business owners, right? That they do need a lot of help in their day to day life. So it's an easier handoff to my fellow attorneys or fellow payroll processors or merchant services or CFOs, right? So it's an easier handoff because I am a part of these groups. I know these professionals. I surround myself with these successful professionals that can basically, number one, make me look good in front of the client and add value to our respective clients to help their business thrive as well. And that's pretty much what the American dream is all about, right? Number
Sure.
one, help.
Now, did you find yourself doing any type of kind of building that network, so to speak, when you were in college? whether it was through coaches or other friends or athletes or alumni?
It did happen over the summers, Rob, where I got the opportunity to teach tennis at a tennis club up in the Hamptons, New York, where I still go there, visit, have had made very great contacts with very successful people, right, that have helped me personally with my business side of things as well, right? I would say for me, networking, being putting yourself out there has helped me a lot in terms of my practice, even more than I could, speak.
Yeah, and it's to some people it's daunting, but we always talk about it, just kind of advice, just do even back in high school. I mean, think about you've got your friends and their parents, and you've got coaches. It's just like you just said, put kind of don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I mean, people want to help, and I think it's along the way, whether it's in high school or college, start to build these relationships. And the one thing that we always talk about and is that it's all about paying it forward too. Is I think when you go into a situation with networking and connecting, it's not necessarily what's in it for you, but like how can you help others? And sometimes people say, well, how can I help somebody who's a multimillionaire? Let's say, well, maybe they've got kids and you can do something to help their kids or whatever it might be. Maybe there's a nonprofit or charitable organization they're involved with that you could help. So always be open to, I think people want to help, but be open to kind of giving back as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah, you just hit the spot right there. Definitely, we're all about giving back. I am a part of a few non-for-profit organizations. Help them serve on the board of a few as well as my part of pro bono and basically giving back to people out there. As you mentioned earlier in our podcast, that they don't teach taxes, accounting, the
Right.
business side of things in college. So it's a tough place to be, but it's great that through my licenses and through my network, we're able to help and give back to the society and fellow entrepreneurs and fellow ex athletes.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's just again back to like I always think of it too, like big pictures when I'm talking to people, like how can I help them? Like it's funny as we're having this conversation now, I'm like thinking, oh yeah, I got somebody I'm with. We'll talk offline. I got somebody I want to introduce you to. I think you guys, you have good synergy there. So that's important. But let's kind of switch gears and talk about alumni engagement, alumni connections. When you were at Alcorn State, was there a movement at all from the school to bring back athletes to mentor, some of the current athletes or maybe even the alumni athletes?
So we had no, there was not. I did propose that to the school, and I'm sure they have started or touched base on this, but it's a pretty cool concept where, former alumni, especially in the athletic side of things, they do visit, of course, for the homecomings and the big games, right? But this should happen on a more frequent basis because people are graduating all the time. They're stepping into the real world and they do need like a helping hand or some sort of support group that, basically advises them on the do's and don'ts of the real world.
Yeah.
So I like the idea. I would absolutely recommend it in Alcorn State and the other universities that I graduated from in my master's as well.
Yeah, I think it's and it's something that obviously it's a two-way street. I mean, the athlete, needs to want to come back as well, but I think it's a missing thing. And a part of it, I guess, is that, the especially like the coaches, the athletic directors, I mean, they're zoned in on winning now. And it's not that they don't care, but I mean, that's they're, concentrating on that current athlete. But I think that even as, these alumni athletes that struggle, wouldn't it be great if they can, tap into that alumni network of somebody that maybe has gone through what they've gone through and now can do it. Or even when you think about, like we were talking about earlier, like even the education of life after, a lot of times the athlete might be like, yeah, whatever, like I'm going to be pro, but like to have an alumni athlete who's experienced that, and even if the alumni athlete was good enough to make it professionally, however long they played, ultimately they're still going to, transition out of sport. So for them to talk to the current athletes who are or help the struggling alumni athletes, I think is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree.
So this is the part I always like to do. It used to be a twist. It's not anymore because I've done it for like so many episodes now. But I always like to ask these questions. They're simple. I'm not going to put you on the spot on crazy stuff or anything. But um, what advice would you give to freshman Nischay?
That's a great question. You did put me on spot. What advice would I give to my freshman self? Go out more, have fun. Yeah, freshman year is always tough, right? Because you're away from home for a longer period of time. So definitely there's some sense of feeling of homesickness, right? So I would say go out, make friends. Start trusting people. Senior year would be ruthless. Be don't succumb to people's opinions of you.
That's great. Yeah, I like it. It's very concise because when I ask that question, I mean, it goes across the board. I mean, some people are like,
Mhm.
okay, are we like, do we talk about the PG version of like not partying in college, or like, or is it
Right.
more like, what other advice? So it's kind of a cool question or questions. So
Right.
I always like to hear how people answer that. So all right, let's we're gonna kind of fast forward now, getting into back to the transition. Talk a little bit about your transition out of tennis once you were done at Alcorn State.
Yeah, absolutely. So right after college, I did have offers from major big companies in New York City, but I always wanted to have my own practice, right? So I chose a small boutique CPA firm in South Florida, Miami. And, the reason is I get to get my hands wet on pretty much a lot of things. I got the opportunity to work with all different sort of industries, different types of tax returns, which definitely helped me to become a better entrepreneur and help serve all the business owners from respective fields, right? So that happened right after college. Worked for somebody for about 4 or 5 years, learned the value of networking, putting yourself out there, which, and then fast forward to, I believe, fall of 2019, spring 2020, in the midst of pandemic COVID, I went ahead and took the leap of faith to start my own practice, and here we are.
Yeah, that's great. So any words of advice that you would give to athletes as they kind of embark on that change in their life?
Don't be afraid to embrace change. It would be very short, precise, because coming after, and I'll elaborate on why I said that, right? A lot of us, or a lot of the athletes, are, open, or they only stick to a lot of the coaches, right? In the real world, the coach, precise, could be your manager, or the managing partner, or the owner of the firm, right? So, because the business world is constantly changing. A lot of the athletes that I come across, they want to start their own practice. Entrepreneurship, is a very lonely journey. And if sure, you could hire coaches, you could hire business coaches, you could hire professionals. That does come at a cost, which in the initial stages of the entrepreneurial journey is not required, right? So don't be afraid to embrace the change and go back to the roots of what we grew up with in the gym, or on the field, or on the tennis court, or on the football field, right? So constantly those repetitions is going to compound results, uh, probably 10 times more than you've ever imagined, if we stay consistent with our efforts in the real world, like we did in our athletic journey.
Yeah, and I think talking about that, the athletic journey, and we you touched on a little bit before, but I kind of want to come back to um, the athlete's skill set and DNA, and even like from your perspective, like if you were hiring or just knowing what you know with, like, when you went through it with companies, like what kind of special traits do you see that athletes have, and how they can bring those to businesses that might be looking for help?
Yeah, discipline number one, right? Discipline, that relentless mindset of doing the job, right? That has helped. And one thing that I love about being an athlete and talking to the athletes, that most of us were not afraid of failing, right? Why? Every time we are in the gym or on the tennis court, me personally, I fail every shot I miss, right? I
Right.
fail every set or every exercise rep I used to do in the gym, right? So that constant sense of improvement either could be on your physical state, mental state, fitness, right? That plays or goes long ways in the real world where especially now things have been so easy in my opinion, right? With the advancement of technology that it's tough to find people with those mindset. For me personally, I could easily distinguish within probably 5 minutes of talking to the person, man, this person may have played a sport,
Right.
or this person might have been a Division One athlete, right? The way they carry themselves, the way they talk, or the way their grind or daily life looks like, you know.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Is there do you see a camaraderie amongst athletes, and really not mattering what sport, but especially, we talked about the networking, connecting, and you get involved in a lot of different events. Do you see that and the kind of the gravitation pull to bringing athletes together, regardless of what sport?
Absolutely. There is, of course, a common ground, right? Which is the love for the sport or constantly becoming the better version of yourself, right? And it's a pretty nice icebreaker, right? If I find me personally on a personal level, if I find somebody in any of my networking group played a sport, we don't talk necessarily much about the sport, but how playing that sport has shaped us in our respective entrepreneurial journeys and how we could use that to grow our respective practices and our respective companies as well, you know. So sports does lay a great foundation in, I'd say, real life stuff, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's just, and the more I talk about it, and like every episode I do, it just becomes more evident. And even we do I do a monthly networking event for my guests, and it's just really cool to see. I might have a swimmer, a tennis player, soccer, baseball, Major League Baseball, NFL guy, but to see these athletes coming together in a group and just kind of putting rolling up the sleeves and say, how can we help each other in our businesses? So it's really cool to see that, and I think it's all comes back to like what we've been talking about is kind of that skill set. So let's talk about your business. So now you've gone through, you've worked for several different firms, but now you took the plunge and you said, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, and you started a business. Tell us more about your business and there's some of the different things that you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, NR CPAs and Business Advisors is the name of our firm. We're headquartered in Miami, Florida, where we're serving entrepreneurs, clients, customers in about 17 different states within US. A lot of international work, and the services that we provide ranges from accounting, bookkeeping, taxes, fractional CFO, assurance and audit, right? My personal preference is to help serve entrepreneurs build their business while mitigating their tax exposure, right? Tax world, I would say, is very complex. You know, we've touched upon it that it has not been taught in school, you know, so we try our best to explain it to entrepreneurs in the best possible manner while assisting them to make better business decisions.
Okay, that's great. And then one thing, and we didn't really talk about it, and it's because it wasn't necessarily around when you were playing, but it's interesting. I told you I do another podcast called NIL for You, and now with Florida, passing all the laws, so now it is legalized for high school students in Florida. Have you started seeing any people kind of reaching out on that? Because obviously it's so important. Like we talked about taxes and things that they're basically setting up businesses. These athletes. Are you seeing any kind of windfall yet from the new regulations? I mean, it just happened, but are people starting to talk about that at all?
There have been some inquiries on a grassroots level, not a lot at the moment, but again, it's just the nature of the beast, right? People, like by the time it passes, I'm sure it's been passed, and the inquiries come out, right? We will be there to be able to help serve the clients, and it's an easier sale because I personally was an athlete. I could relate to it. It wasn't there when we were playing, right? But
Right.
now
Unfortunately, right.
these these resources are available for these young athletes to at least get education while making money, right? Uh, so I definitely think it's a great idea. It's a great rule. We are taking out a lot of what you want to call like I am writing a lot of blogs about these particular posts, like what NIL has impacted and what impact it will hold. So hopefully it is for the good. I am sure it is for the good, and we'll
Yeah.
be happy to like take on any queries that anybody has regarding this.
All right. So now you know where to go. We got to look them up, especially us people down in Florida. And then you said you're in multiple states. So do you do that remote, or do you have other accountants there in the states, or do you travel to other states? Like, how does that work?
So it's a little bit of everything. I would say pandemic has pretty much changed the shape of business, right? So I personally travel a lot, love to travel, and we do a lot of work remote. If I have to be the site, I would be happy to roll my sleeves and hop on a flight and meet the clients, right? So yeah, it's a little bit of everything. We pretty much cater towards the client's needs. Especially first few meetings, I prefer in person because of that personal touch. I personally am very traditional in that sense. I like to do things in person, and of course, once clients get acclimatized to us and our culture of the firm, it's an easier transition from in person to remote.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's impactful. I mean, anytime you have, the founder of the company, the CEO, like, coming out and meeting with the people, and that's something that I think they appreciate. It's just showing, you're interested in them. You're not just sending anybody. I mean, you're taking the time to do that, which is great. So how do people find you?
Yeah, so people can look us up on our website. It's nrcpas.com. Through my LinkedIn. We'll roll out my LinkedIn tags and Instagram. So any questions you have, feel free to shoot me an email or reach out to us. I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, that's great. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com. The show is across different networks. We have a YouTube channel, and we also are across like Spotify and Apple, iTunes, all that kind of stuff. So you can find us also on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram. And this is something that's so important. It's such a topic that I think, not that it gets brushed away, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. I think people are open to hearing more and getting help. So I always enjoy having guests like Nischay on here to just give ideas and solutions. And I think, hopefully we can get more people to continue to watch and listen and just impact everybody's lives. So again, thank you so much. It was another great episode of Athletes and Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey.
Thanks, Rob. It's great.